You know, when you haven't played a lot of Battlefield 3 in a while, it sometimes takes me a really long time to get my shot back, and for some reason, I was really on top of my game yesterday. I hopped into a TDM lobby here on Sing Crossing. I was like, alright, let's warm up a little bit, let's see if I can get my shot back. For the most part, I don't really like TDM. I'm mostly an objective guy, but I do see the value in TDM lobbies because you can level up your gun, you know, you can get your shot back, and that's what I was trying to do. And one of the weapons that I wanted to fool around with a little bit was the F2000. Because on my AEK video, a lot of you guys asked me, you're like, hey, why don't you use the Foregrip on the AEK? And I basically said, you know, I don't like Foregrip. Foregrip is just not for me. I feel like it penalizes you way too much these days, to the point where I just do not enjoy using Foregrip. But my one exception is the F2000. The F2000 is the one weapon that I will run Foregrip on. Because the thing about the F2000 is it used to be a really top tier weapon. Everybody, and I mean everybody, used to run this weapon before, like, you know, the first like 2 months of the game. The F2000 was the elite weapon. You saw so many squads of people just running around with this thing. Then I think the car can patch came, you know, then you saw the Foregrip patch. There were all sorts of patches, new weapons that kind of led to the downfall of the F2000. But that's not to say it's not still a good weapon, because I still really do enjoy using the F2000. It looks awesome. I mean, it's probably one of the coolest looking weapons in the world, at least in my opinion. I think this thing looks awesome, and I've always enjoyed using it in video games. And it's still pretty good. I think it's still pretty good in this game. The one huge advantage to it is just how well it handles in my eyes. I think it is a very good handling gun, especially on maps like Sing Crossing here, where there's turns into a lot of standoffs, where, you know, you've got people in alleyways, you've got people in hallways, around corners, and you've got to push around corners, you've got to push down the hallways. And I think that's where the F2000 kind of shines, because it is a bullpup weapon. It's going to have a slower reload, we already know that. Bullpups have slow reloads. But then on the flip side, though, you've got better hip fire, you got better handling. You know, when you're aiming down sight, pushing around that corner, it's going to handle a lot better. You're going to strafe a lot faster, and it has better aim down sight accuracy while strafing. If you truly sit down and look at the assault rifles that have the best accuracy when strafing, it's this and the L85 are actually the only two. They're almost 30% better than the normal assault rifles, so that's a pretty big advantage, and I think that's why the F2000 definitely is one of the better handling urban environment type assault rifles. And I use that term loosely because, you know, there's a difference between close quarters and urban environments, and oh, I was not expecting that guy to have a shotgun. Because usually when you see a recon guy, you're expecting him to have some sort of bolt action, or at least a semi-auto, but more times than not I am disappointed, and it turns out he actually has a shotgun or a PDW or something like that, and you get pwned to the face. But yeah, I always feel like, you know, there's a difference between close quarters and urban environments, because urban environments, there's a lot of hallways, there's a lot of like longer lines of sight, because I mean, if you're looking down these hallways, sometimes you can get some long lines of sight, especially on this map. So when I really think about it, you know, there's a difference between a good urban weapon and a good close quarters weapon. I know that's probably pretty confusing, but in close quarters, usually rate of fire is king. And I think the F2000 does a pretty good job of balancing rate of fire with handling, and that's one of the reasons why I think it's one of the better weapons for urban environments in the game. So it might actually be a good weapon for Aftermath. We'll see. We will see. It really just depends on how big Aftermath ends up being. But, you know, the F2000 has never really let me down. It's always been a pretty solid choice. But Foregrip, that's the topic of this video. 3 minutes and 45 seconds in. We haven't even talked about Foregrip, but this is one of the few weapons that I will use Foregrip on. And really, there's a lot of factors that go into that decision. On my AEK video, a lot of you guys were like, Jake, why don't you use Foregrip on the AEK? There's a lot of side-to-side recoil. And honestly, on a lot of weapons, and AEK included, I find it's a lot easier just to manage the recoil yourself. You know, side-to-side recoil is one of the harder recoils to kind of compensate for, especially if the weapon doesn't have a lot of vertical recoil, because if it has some vertical recoil along with side-to-side recoil, then you can kind of just pull down into whatever direction it pulls towards the most, kind of tames back the recoil. I mean, the FAMAS is a great example of a weapon that has recoil in all sorts of different directions. I mean, if you've ever tried the FAMAS with just heavy barrel, that thing is insane. It's like a bull. It's like trying to throw you off at every opportunity it gets. So with the FAMAS, that's another weapon. You know, sometimes I might use Foregrip on it just because it does kind of contain that movement, because I feel like I can't compensate for recoil on the FAMAS. So weapons that I feel like I can compensate for, I never touch Foregrip, because I would rather deal with the recoil than the accuracy penalty, which you really can't control. I mean, aim down sight accuracy is something that you really have no control over. I mean, that's a game mechanic versus something that you can technically compensate for, like the AEK side-to-side movement, by just pulling down and to the right, because it does have kind of a right side movement. You pull down to the right, you kind of compensate for that recoil. So in most situations, I've never really liked the foregrip, but the F2000 has always been my exception, and I am using it with heavy barrel here. And I found that since it does have so much side-to-side recoil, much like the FAMAS, that it makes it a more controllable weapon. You know, it kind of helps that movement through the map. Like I said, I use this as kind of my peek and lean class. I kind of look out there, I kind of lean around corners. That's where this really does excel in my eyes. I think it does really well in those environments, and I find the foregrip makes it much easier to stay on target. Combo that with the heavy barrel and you're really not getting that much penalty. It actually offsets the penalty and you're actually gaining a little bit of accuracy. So heavy barrel plus foregrip on F2000 is awesome. Try it out. I know this is a pretty generic combo, but it doesn't seem like people use the F2000 like they used to. So maybe if you used to be an F2000 kind of guy, you can go back and give it a little love. But hopefully you guys did enjoy this quick little video. Like I said, not a huge fan of foregrip, but when I do use it, it's usually on like the F2000 or the FAMAS or maybe even the MTAR. But the weapon needs to have substantial side-to-side recoil. So hopefully you did enjoy that. Check out any videos you might have missed, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.